Okay, welcome everyone to March 2021 Auckland System User Groups meetup. So it's time to start it again. Actually, we should have started that in February, but the weather was too good for that. So now that we're starting to have rain and all of this, let's start to have our regular meetup again. As usual, a little bit about us, right? We have over 500 members. We've been organizers of the Global Integration Bootcamp here in Auckland since the beginning. Our leadership team is composed by Greg Hayden, Colin T. Graff, Mike Howell, that is not with us, not with us in the meeting. Don't get me wrong. Myself, Alessandro, and Will. Right? If you want to help, you can volunteer for a talk, right? We're looking for the people. We wanted to keep more or less the same cadence that we had last year. That was, I think, 9 or 10 sessions throughout the year, which was quite good. So we're trying to keep the same and keep it regular on the last week of the month. So if you wanted to volunteer for a talk, feel free. We're more than open for new speakers. We have enough people around that can raise the hand to help doing any kind of mentorship, helping you with set up the presentation, co-present if you feel that is required, right? So don't think that is, I never presented before to be a showstopper. We can help on that one. The other way that you can help is suggesting any topics, right? So if you have something that you're really interested in seeing, suggest, and then you can either hunt down someone that would be expert on that and beg them to make a presentation, or try to organize something among ourselves. Or even better, help work with you so you present and becomes an expert on that as well. And if you want, you can raise your hand to help organizations. We always needed people to help us on the social media, organizing the meetups, all that kind of thing, and the more the merrier. If you wanted to follow us, that you can follow on at ACSUG NZ. And now that we are getting those sessions online and recording all of that, we also creating a YouTube channel, and you can go there to bit.ly/ACSUG-channel, and from that is going to be redirected to YouTube. On that note, please go and subscribe, because if you get over 100 subscribers, I think, you should be able to have our own path, like ACSUG, YouTube/ACSUG, which is going to make our life much easier. For today's show, we're gonna have yours truly talking about the Logic Apps preview, right? I think a lot of you already heard about the new preview on Logic Apps, and the idea on that is having Logic Apps running on top of the Azure Runtime. So we're going to be talking about that soon. The legends about of ACSUG, every meetup, I try to come with something interesting that is related to the special meetup. And on that one, I didn't have much to say apart from I've been awake since 2:30 a.m. attending the MVP Summit. So I can actually have the bragging rights to be jet lagged while actually presenting here in New Zealand. The other thing is just for the FYI from you guys. This presentation is actually a compilation of various sessions on the same subject. So it's going to be a brief version of a lot of the presentations that I did, or two of the presentations that I did before. And you should have access to those ones on Integration that Wonder as well, if you wanted to go a bit deeper on that. Without any further ado, let's talk about the Logic Apps preview. So it's combining the power of Logic Apps with Azure functions. Not going to spend much more time about me, right? You guys know that I work for Tita. I'm one of the Azure MVPs and one of the core organizers here at Wonder. The things that I wanted for you to take out of that is, if you wanted to have it get in touch with me, you can either use Twitter on WSilveiraNZ, or you can send me an mail on wagner.silveira@note2self.tech. And also, I still maintain my technical blog, so you can find information on note2self.tech. Lately, it's been probably a new post every 2 months or so, and sometimes comes in flurries, and then I stop for a while. But I still like some information that might be worth taking a look at. For the agenda today, we're going to be talking about a little bit of the introduction. What is Logic Apps Runtime? Then what is the models that comes with the Logic Apps, right? They created a couple of different models and how they work together. Having a look into the VS Code extension, that is the main, the new way to develop that. It was one of the big changes, apart from being able to run that on the function runtime. That was the other big change. The debugging experience, I only going to be talking about it because my machine decided not to play well with the bug today. It's probably been doing updates that it shouldn't, right? So I'm going to show you the debugging, how you should be able to set up for that, but you have to take my word for that right now, and then maybe seeing some of the videos that are going to be put in that reference. But it works, I promise. And we're going to be talking about integration account support. So how you can have some of the options on the integration account that you had before. And to have before on Logic Apps, you would need to set up an integration account. Now, for some of those, you should be able to just implement that as part of your Azure function. So your Logic Apps runtime, sorry. And finally, how you're able to run that locally, and how can you publish from the cloud. And in this case, is just showing the right-click deploy, but you should be able to do the same thing with DevOps. Then I'm going to give some references for you to go a bit deeper if you want to. So starting up, what is this new Logic Apps runtime, right? So with that, now instead of being locked into running on Azure as a per consumption only Logic Apps that you know and love right now, you're able to run that everywhere, and you have a much more choices in terms of how we're going to be running. So you can, when I say that it's run anywhere, that means that you can run on Azure natively, just as another PaaS service, but you can also containerize that to run on other clouds, or to run on premises, as long as you're able to run as part of a container, a Docker container. The way that they pull that off is layering up Logic Apps on top of the Azure Functions runtime. So it's based on Azure Functions extensibility framework that is already there. And that also means that a lot of the connectors, that's the problem. I told you that I was a bit jet lagged. A lot of the connectors can be extended, and you can create your own just using the functions extensibility as well. You choose the resilience now, because instead of you running that and having to pay for having to share the environment with everyone and paying on that micro billing kind of process that you had before, you can say that I wanted to run that on-prem on one or more Docker containers, and I'm going to be managing the type of resilience that I want, or I'm going to be running that on Azure on another cloud, and I wanted that in one region or two, and having all the things that comes with that. So you decide the resilience. Also, your choice of compute. When you're running locally, you decide that what is going to be the size of the container that you're going to be running. When you're pushing that to cloud, you can run any either on a consumption plan or on an app service plan, and decide the type and the size of the compute that you need for that. And with that, you're going to have a little bit more predictability on the cost, because you're going to be running on the compute that you selected. And more, you're going to have logic apps as part of your application, right? So the idea of having integration as a commodity that is built into your application instead of something else that you do on the side and then you connect is one of the things that Microsoft is selling a lot lately. So integration everywhere. In a way, everyone is an integration developer, and that's another push into that, to making sure that those services can be much closer to the developer, and you can work seamlessly with them instead of being a totally different topic on the side. All right. That doesn't mean that your knowledge as an integration expert is going to be lost and now everyone is going to be doing that kind of implementation. What that means now is that you should be able to share and to deploy and to manage the things with the same tool sets and on the same kind of experience that the other developers have. As part of the Logic Apps runtime, they came up with two types of models, right? One was called the stateful model, or the stateful Logic Apps, and the other one is the stateless Logic Apps. So the Logic Apps that we know today that is running on the consumption is what we call stateful Logic Apps. So it keeps all the state in storage, meaning that from your trigger when it's fired to the last action that is being executed, all the inputs and outputs has been captured, allowing you to have a really rich traceability of what is happening, and at the same time allow you easy resubmission without having to require third party or the source system to send it to you, right? So you have a lot more resiliency on that. You can keep running that function for up to an year and keep it dehydrated and running on the background as part of that stateful Logic app. And it's going to be supporting all the triggers and actions from the managed connections. The run history on that is enabled by default exactly because it's storing all those states for you, right? So you have the Logic apps that you have today represented as part of inside of this new system. But the problem of that is that it comes with a cost. It comes with the cost of every time that you're reading or that you're starting and finishing an action, you have to keep a log for that, and you have to keep that information stored somewhere, and all of that comes with a performance decrease. From a stateless point of view, with the new Logic apps, stateless Logic apps, the state now only exists in memory. That is going to be speed up the process. Now, all the information that is required for the Logic apps execution is still available because that state exists, but only in memory. But with that, you're not going to be able to do a resubmission without the source system initiating the call again, right? Which means that's now the source system or the caller is responsible for resubmission. That can run for up to 5 minutes compared to the other one because all of that is going to exist in memory. There is no option for dehydration in this case for us that understand the concept from BizTalk. And it's only going to support the actions from managed connectors, right? So the triggers, that can be all the triggers, but only the actions for managed connections. And the run history can be enabled when you need to. So you're going to be doing that usually when you're doing the debug, and then you can turn that off. Just give me 1 second to close the door here. And we're back. So what happens when you mix those two together? So here is something that they put together for us. If you have a parent workflow that is stateful and a child workflow that is stateful, then the child behavior can be asynchronous or synchronous based on enable, disable async pattern settings on the operation options, which means that you can have like the full one long running logic apps calling another long running logic apps, and those two can be running for a long time. When you have a stateful calling a stateless, is going to be like trigger and wait, right? So the child is going to be trigger, execute, and then that is almost like a synchronous call, but the parent is waiting, is not like a running. But the stateless, the child can only run for 5 minutes, so it's going to be trigger and waiting that. From a stateless to stateful is going to be a synchronous call, right? So the stateless is going to be waiting for that to come back. And from the stateless to stateless is going to be also the trigger and wait. So one is going to be calling and waiting for the other one to finish. The new VS Code extension, that is one of the big changes that they did, is going to be allowing you now to have a local development environment much closer to what you have on the portal, right? So you can actually graphically design your logic apps locally on the Visual Studio Code, like you would be doing with a form or like an orchestration on Beanstalk. Although the relative on Visual Studio, So it's going to be a full new design experience, right? They not only bring the designer into Visual Studio Code, is also improved the designer look and feel and the experience on how it works. We can see that soon. It's going to allow you to do local execution as long not as long as is running locally. You should be able to actually test everything locally. If you have managed connections that is going to the cloud, is going to be going up to the cloud and coming back, but you're going to be running everything locally. That is going to give you a much improved developer experience, because so far you're always thinking about creating the things in the portal and then go somewhere else to run the tests, and then coming back and waiting for it to finish executing and looking, right? So doing all of that inside of Visual Studio, the combination of the designer with the local execution and with the debugger, that is we're going to be talking later, all of that gives a much more streamlined way to implement and to test all of that. The other thing that is I think is really good from my point of view is that the packaging for that is much simpler, because what you're going to have is an actual function, for the lack of a better word, a function app wrapped that you can actually deploy either from Visual Studio Code or using your novel DevOps. But in the end, you're going to have compiled code instead of what we have before. There was just some templates floating somewhere. And the project, now you have like a workflow project that combines a number of logic apps, and you can deploy as a unit of as part of an application. So you have a unit of deployment now that is not the resource group, but not just single logic apps. You can have like 4 or 5 logic apps running together as part of an application that you're deploying. how is this project structured? You're going to have two files that is going to give kind of generic information. One is your connections.json that give you your connections information, like your API connectors information or links to that. Then you have your general configuration on the host.json. That's where you're going to have your potentially some of your environment variables and the information about the runtime and all the kind of stuff. And then you have the workflow configuration. On the workflow configuration is actually the information that you know so far. That is the definition of the workflow. Just brushing quickly about debugging, right? So now you have the ability to put breakpoints and stop the execution at a certain point, right? Those breakpoints are going to be put in on that workflow.json, which, as I said before, is the configuration or the definition of the logic apps. So I could put, for example, breakpoint at the beginning or at the end of an action. So in this case, I would be putting at the beginning of a compose and at the beginning of a response. But I could have like at the end of the compose or at the end of the response. You can choose, right? Start of end of actions is the places where you can put breakpoints, and those breakpoints are going to be honored. And at this stage, you cannot put breakpoints on triggers yet, but seems like it's something on the backlog. But yeah, I tried. It was the first thing that I tried. I tried to put a breakpoint on triggers, and I didn't like it. Finally, the last topic before you can actually have some hands-on. One of the things that's been announced that late last year, like December or January this year, I can remember, but it was like one of the latest announcements was the integration account support. So far, if you needed to do XML operations or JSON transformation, you needed to create an integration account. And the problem with that integration account was not just there was another component to be deployed, but also it was something that would have an additional cost on a totally different format or pricing model that we had with the logic apps. While logic apps was micro billing and paying for actions, that one was a subscription based and with like tiers that was too cost grained. And there was a lot of pushback from the community, especially around XML and JSON, to say, why are we doing that? Why do I need an integration account to convert an XML to another one? I can create Azure functions and do that. And in fact, a lot of people was doing that, right? Or I can get a liquid template and just creating a transformation from JSON to some other format. What Microsoft did as part of, or the product team did as part of this new runtime, they understand that that was a request that a lot of people was having, and now they have two types or part of what the integration account would support as inside the Logic Apps preview as part of the Logic Apps app, right? So the components that you have is like the idea of liquid operations or XML operations. The liquid operations are going to convert across different types using liquid templates. So JSON to JSON, JSON to XML, XML to JSON, JSON to HTML, to CSV, all that kind of stuff. You should be able to do relatively simply with liquid operations. And if you still have a lot of the legacy systems using XML, or you're still having to implement things today that need XML and needs XML transformations, although it's an acquired taste, there is a few things that is as powerful as an XSLT for that kind of stuff. And it gives you support for XSLT. And if I'm not wrong, it now gives you support for XSLT 3.0. I needed to double check that, but I think it gives that as well. The other thing that is quite useful in a lot of scenarios is the XML schema validation. So all those operations now are part of the Logic App fabric. You don't need integration account anymore. You should be able to just use that. Finally, enough of me just talking, and let's take a look of the Visual Studio Code experience. Just a reminder, anyone?
Just one quick question from Craig here. The schemas, where are they stored?
I'm going to show you.
Oh, okay, good man.
Yeah, but it's all going to be part of the actual app. So it has like spoiler alert, they have like a artifacts folder that's where you can drop. So one advantage of that is that you have those things much closer to the applications, but it's not like what we have before on Beachtalk, where you could have like different versions of the schemas associated to multiple components, unless you do like a central logic app, which is the only purpose of that is validating schemas and creating transformations, so you can push that to a different place. Okay.
Thanks, man. Sorry to ruin the surprise.
No, that's fine. But it's that's what I was saying. It's informal, and you should be asking questions. Where is my machine? See. Cool. So first things first, I'll move that camera here just in case. Guys can still see me, or just the top of my head?
No, you faded into the background. Oh no, there you are.
Cool. So the experience here now for Logic Apps, in order to unlock that, you're going to need to install the Logic Apps preview extension, right? So when you install that, then it's going to allow you to, what is going to give you is an area on the Azure Blade here for Visual Studio Code, where it shows all the it's going to be showing all the subscriptions that you have available. With like you can filter that, all that good thing. And inside of that, if you have any Logic App preview deployed, you can see here. And inside of this, you can see like the workflows, the configuration, the deployments, all of that, right? But even better than that, you can have the local experience. So if you needed to create a new one, you can just come and create a new project. You select the folder. So that's going to be the folder. You say for the first one, the first Logic App, what is the type of Logic App you're going to create? Those two that we discussed before, stateful or stateless, right? So let's say stateful for now. ACSUG hello world. And it's going to open that in a new window, because then we can come back here later. And straight away, it creates the whole setup. You see that you have this ACSUG hello world Logic Apps. Underneath that, you have like a workflow.json, which is the definition of that Logic App, right? We also have your hosts.json. You have your local settings.json. And the proxies, it's all the things that comes with the Logic Apps. And you have a folder called artifacts where you can put maps and you can put schemas. Okay, so that's where you're going to be dropping those items later on. But let's say that this is what we need. And just a heads up for everyone, one of the requirements for that when you are running locally is to have your Azure Storage Emulator running, right? I'm going to click on that one again just to double check that it's already running. Seems like it's already running just in case, because a lot of times I had a problem of trying to get that to run and the designer just didn't work. And the whole reason was the emulator was not running. So if you right click on the workflow JSON associated to that logic apps that you just create, you're going to see a couple of things here. You can see an overview, and that overview is going to give you kind of a definition similar to the current state of that logic app, right? When you're running that on the cloud. And that is going to be important later on because that's where you're going to be finding information about the triggers when you're using triggers like the HTTP trigger, okay? But the other thing that is going to be quite useful here, just close that, is opening Designer. And it's just getting the Designer ready to run. On the very first one, it takes a little bit longer. Here is asking, do you want to enable connectors from Azure? Or do you just want to skip for now and just using local built-in connectors? I'm going to make that one extremely simple right now. It's literally hello world. So skip for now. Right. And I'm going to say that this is when an HTTP request is received that has a name, then it's going to respond with guess what? The body response to that is going to be content type text plain hello name. Extremely complex, really hard. You'll not be able to do that without all of this. Once I save that, and I can just go and run, then it's going to be building, doing the whole thing. There is the problem related for my debugging that I was talking before. So double check that. There we go. So it built, and now we have that endpoint here, right? But if I try to just use that endpoint, not going to work. And I'll show you why. So one thing that I'm doing more and more here to simplify, especially when I have HTTP requests like that one, I'm starting to create a new folder called tests, and I'm creating a HTTP file. So hello world.htp, and that is using can use the REST client. So if I do like a post that HTTP /1.1 with name, just in case, Auckland connected systems user group. If I run that, that is going to is not going to work. It's coming as a bad request. And the reason for that is because this is just the endpoint for the logic apps itself, but not for the trigger. In order to find out the trigger, I can come. Damn it, put that in the wrong place. Let me delete that. It's fine. Save that in another place, just a minute. So in order to get that, if I go to overview, here is now that the whole logic app is running, this is the callback URL for the trigger. So now if I try that one and create a new test, just because I put the test in the wrong place. Add a new folder. I don't want it here. Come on. Better. Use that. Passing and we're lucky. This comes back with OK and didn't put my result. Why? Let's take a look. Ah, I know why. Because I didn't say that the content type of that was application JSON. So hopefully, there we go. So very hard logic app to implement, but going through that exercise shows like how easier from a development point of view it is, right? You have everything here. You can have like your tests, especially if using that kind of HTTP trigger and things like that, all in one environment. I didn't have to deploy that before to test. I just run the normal tests and things like that. Okay, so that was like just showing how to get started, how we can get all of that running, and how easy it is to get. So now let's take a look at a couple of the logic apps here. So on that one, I have a couple that is a little bit, not much, but a little bit more complex. And if you look at the Opening Designer, so on that one, actually, that just let me open the stateful first, because I wanted to show you a couple of things that I found different. So on that one, what I'm doing is when I receive a request, I'm going to initialize a variable with the body. I'm going to transform that body into using this transformation sample, which you can find here on the maps, right? So that transformation sample is this one here. And then I'm going to respond to that. Okay, and you can see there's the items that are here of that type. In this case, is a liquid transfer, a liquid transfer template transforming XML to JSON. and I can find that. So those are the two liquid templates that I have, so it shows it here. Okay, in order to include that, it's just as easy as add an action, select what is the types of that one? I think is transform. And here is the actions. There is a so you have JSON to JSON, JSON to text, XML to JSON, XML to text, and the transform XML, which is XML to XML using XSLT. So liquid operations and XML operations. If you select one of those and include the item, then you just needed to pass the content from wherever it comes and what is the map that you're going to get. One thing that I find out is you needed to put the map first and then include the action because of at least at the time that I was running, that's how it was working. That's probably something that they're going to improve later on. Okay. A couple of other things that we can find here is all the information now from a designer point of view is on that sidebar instead of you seeing the things inside the actual inside the action card that we had before. So the card has been moved here, and you have all the different options on a menu that you can like collapse and spend. So from a real estate point of view, it's going to be much simpler to work with this. That is also, if you click outside, there is some options around the from the trigger point of view. What are the settings like related to that? And then for each one of the actions, the different settings that you have and things like that. So it's really close. One thing that I noticed when I was working with stateful logic apps was that I had access to, because I have state, then I had access with things like variables, right? And then on my first presentation, I tried to create exactly the same one as a stateless just to compare. And the first thing that I found was when I tried to use the stateless one and I tried to add a variable action, guess what? You don't have a variable. You don't have access to that action because all of that is state in memory, so it doesn't keep the variables. The way that I replaced that was using the things that we did before we had before we have variables. That is just creating composes for that, right? So all the things that you can find out here on the designer is right click and delete, like the same moving around is working like you would be expecting or supposed to. Let me adding something here that doesn't have an actual dependency. So this is a compose to. And now I can move those things around. As long as you don't have dependencies, it should be able to move around. Okay, so it's actually allowing you to keep your dependencies. But the other thing that I also found is, yes, I can delete that step. I can even delete that step and it's not going to complain until I save that. When I save, that's when it's going to be complaining, because that one actually had a response. It actually removed the response because I deleted the other one. So let me close that without saving anything before I destroy all my demos. Let's run a couple of those just to show what we have. I was trying to show you debugging as well, but I don't think I'm going to be able to, right? The way that you're going to be debugging is you open the workflow and you find the place where you wanted to put the debug point. And when debug is working, because on my one, you can notice that I have a couple of the, issues with the function runtime behind the scenes, right? So if I try start debugging, it's going to give me a little error here. That error. And then because of that, I'm not able to run the debug. So if I go, which one is this? Logic Apps Demo. If I go and do my Logic Apps Demo test, it's going to work, no problem. But it's not going to be stopping on the debugging endpoint, right? But you can see like what we just showed before. I have an XML converting to JSON, and we can do all of that now using like just the normal Liquid templates and stuff without the requirement of having a integration account or having to push all of that to function. So that is going to make life much easier for a lot of people.
Wagner, the deployable artifact for this, is it compiled code or is it still designer access through the portal?
No, it's compiled code. Yeah. So the at the end of the thing here, this is what is it actually is.
Awesome.
And just to show you that, let me go to. I don't have that particular one. I can always create one. Portal.azure.com. Nope, not that one. It's the same, but it's not. It's just because I'm too old. So the experience here is you can create a new resource, and that is called Logic App Preview. And when you're creating that, you're saying what is the same thing, right? So this is ACSUG demo. Then from the hosting point of view, you can select a new storage and you can select a new plan, or you can find a storage that already exists, right? Although I'm going to be doing that just for now because I'm going to delete that one. And I already have that service plan, right? But you could go and create an app service plan. And if it was the app service plan, you could select one of the app service plans as well. But I'll just use Functions Premium for now on that one, so I don't have to create another. You can enable monitoring if you wanted to with the application insights, right? And that's another really good thing is now you should be able to get a lot of that telemetry inside application insights instead of having to do on log monitor or log analytics and having two places that you have to push it back. So it's much closer to the developer as well. And because I'm going to delete that straight away, should be fine. So what that one is going to do is just create a normal, you're going to see that it's just a normal function app. While it's creating that, I'm going to show another one that is already there. And when you finish, when it finished creating, then we can do deploy to the. It's already done? No. So that one here is a logic apps that I created before, right? And you can see that it's like really close to the experience that you have with Function app, replacing functions with workflows and connections. So in here, you can see the workflows, right? You can click on that. You can see it on Designer, but it's going to be the all read-only because you're deploying as a package. And you can see the all the information of what you're doing here, or we can see the actual code. And the same overview that you saw there before. Right, so you can drill down for each one of the individual logic apps, the same way that you drill down to a specific function, but you have things here, for example, like authentication and authorization. Are you going to have AppService authentication? Are you going to have identity, add an identity provider and have a set of things? So all of that is now part of the fabric. And when you're doing, before you actually do the calls, you can stop that happening. You have the ability to create either system assigned, and in some places, really soon we're going to have the user assigned here as well. Right, so you can enable a system assigned, and then after that, internally on the logic app, use the identity of the system or user assigned identity to generate a JWT token to go and be validated by a third party. So all the things that you already have on function is going to be available. From a networking point of view, you have VNet integration, right? And that one has a VNet integration enabled, for example.
While you're there, Wagner, there's actually been a question about VNet integration. Does Logic App support VNet integration with premium plans?
Which that one? Or Logic App or Logic App's consumption?
Yeah, okay, got the answer. Sorry, Srini. Sorry, I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly. Srini, feel free to unmute and ask in chat as well if you like.
Go for it, man.
Yeah, all good. I got my answer. So I was wondering if Logic apps support VNet integration, just like Function app with premium plan.
Yes.
Looks like it does.
Any tier that has VNet integration is going to be enabled here, right? So in this case, if you're using the function the function premium tier or app service plan, standard or up, you should be you're going to have VNet integration enabled. So behind the scenes, that is logic. That's still function, right? What they did, and I actually had a slide about that. Just let me see if I can find really quickly, because I know that we're really close to the end, but I'll just see if I can find this one. It was this one here. So the presentation that I did before. I just want to show you one thing. This is the idea of how that runtime works, right? So all of that is the workflow, event listener, interpreter. So it's like the whole workflow runtime that we understand how it works on the consumption. It has been like shrink wrapped to be running inside that specific compute, right, on top of the Azure function runtime. So the function runtime is going to be interacting with this workflow runtime, and then been doing the triggers and stuff. And the jobs are going to, which is like each one of the actions and the order of these actions needs to be executed, is going to be stored inside the Azure storage. So all of that, it's still the is how it's working. So But what I wanted to say about all of that is that in the end, everything is still sitting on top of the Azure Functions runtime. So it's just a layer on top. It's just an extension of Azure Functions. So everything that you have as part of Azure Functions that is not just code related, but part of the fabric of the web app. Because if you go and layer down that, underneath all of this, underpinning all of that is app services, right? So everything that you have available on app services, it is available functions, and because of that, on that version of Logic Apps, depending on the tier that we're using. Did it help?
Yep, thank you.
Cool. So just to finish that now, because I know there is already 6:05, just double check if that Logic App deployed. It's here, being deployed. So what we can do is from here, from from Visual Studio Code, you can come to that, right? And can deploy to Logic Apps the current one. So I'm saying I'm deploying that on Azure MVP, right? Probably need to refresh this so it finds.
Yeah.
There we go. So on Azure MVP, on ACSUG demo, I want sure that you don't deploy, yes, and it's going, and just publish all of that. And that's basically what is deploying, right?
Nice.
And once that finishes, that is available there as a function. Let it running. Anything in the meantime, anything else that is worth taking a look here? No, I think that's all. The other thing that is quite important, right? All the deployment slots and stuff is also available. Not sure if it's working yet, but it's something that is going to be available for us. There we go. It completed. So if you come here and do a quick refresh, we should have the workflows. And on the workflows, you should be able to see the overview and keep that, right? Copy that. From here, just double check which one I'm testing is the Logic App demo. That's fine. So from here, if I replace the one with the local host with the one on Azure websites, which one did I deploy? No, it's not that one. Sorry, that was going to be terribly wrong. It's this one, right? That's the one that I deployed. So if I send that request, I should receive a response. Let's say here is Wagner S. Send. There we go. And to prove that, if you do a refresh, should have like 2 executions because of the 2 that I sent. So really simple. And the advantage of everything is like all tier that together. It's much easier for you to manage, I think. like I already did a couple of tests. You should be able to do like a lot more parameterization using app settings and things like that, probably. So if you just go back to here, I think that was pretty much everything that I have to show. What I have here is a set of references, right? So there was a couple of logic apps live that might be worth taking a look. So one is the logic apps live, where they giving like more or less the same thing that I was showing, like new extension info with some demos, and probably more useful demos than those. More information about the code extension, including like the prerequisites and stuff. So that points to Microsoft Docs. The more information about stateless versus stateful logic apps. What is each one of them? Some samples of how logic apps debugging is working. And one thing that I didn't talk much, but it's like the logic apps connector extension model. So for you to create new custom connectors now, you're going to have a much more richer experience, because you should be able to actually write the connector, just like using the language of your preference, and it's based on the extensibility of the function. So you're going to be creating a connector that is able to be used by logic apps, but potentially also as a binding on functions. And that's me.
Good man.
Thank you.
Well done, good presentation.
There's one there, Wagner, the extension used for the REST client. Do you want to show everyone that extension, just if they want to download the same tools as you?
That is a godsend, yes. And it's literally called...
It's so cool. Such a good extension.
There we go. REST client is that one here. That is awesome. And that is going to work for this. It's going to work for API management. When you're dealing with functions as well, if you're testing that. So you can just document your things like this. And you could even have more than one. Right, and then instead of just doing the send request there, you could like go and Control-Alt-R, and it executes as well. So it's a really good extension called literally REST client.
Nice.
Replaces curl.
Pretty much. Well, it's really nice not having to go to a shell or something, right? Hopping out, actually in your deployments in the checked in. These are the tests. These are the scenarios I sent through. Yeah. Really nice.
Because like you always have that, and then you have a Postman collection, but then the things are disconnected, right? Those ones, for example, I wrote those demos 2 months ago, and usually my problem with the demo is not finding out if the demo is working or not. Is what the hell was the
example
payload that was passing?
Yeah. Right.
Everything is there. It's ready for me. And inside the thing, I opened the project and everything was there. The developer experience for that feels much better.
So I have a couple questions for you. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So so you show that we have the transformation embedded in the same project. Do we have access as well to the expressions or no?
What kind of expression do you mean?
So the JavaScript expressions we could use with integration count in the consumption mode?
I think so. I was doing a test with that today, and actually the logic app run just came back with not a number, probably because I passed something stupid to it. But I created the JS item and was coming. Mm-hmm.
No, that's good, because like today we have the dependence with the integration account to use the expressions. So exactly. That's going to be really nice not to have that dependence anymore.
Mm-hmm. So I'm still, let me share just for a minute and open it again. So if you get one of those, designer, add an action.
You know we can't see your
Inline
screen.
VS Code. Ah, come on, really? I already finished. So sorry.
It's look at that.
Okay.
You're still recording,
Right
guys. So that can
click.
go in the blooper reel.
Right-click, open designer, find the thing, inline code. See, you didn't miss anything. Run inline code JavaScript, and there we go. And then in here you can write JavaScript, and they even have like var x equal this, return x. So we have the whole thing here.
Nice. That's cool.
And
I
that
imagine
one,
in the stateless one, you'll lose that variable if you leave the context of the shape. Must do.
Yeah, one thing you can do on that one, for example, is like this. Then in here, I should be able to add, instead of this, I should be able to add. Go out and come back because I don't know. Yeah, so I could actually get the sum of the items, right? And I could get like the whole body. So the same way that I did that, I would be probably able to do something like workflow context dot variables dot something. Okay, so you should be able to do something like that here, because it has the ability to do this, and it has a level of IntelliSense.
Yep.
So
yeah.
At that point, I could add like instead of that this, right? Workflow trigger outputs body.
That's going to be really useful, because having to write Azure functions today to do is, those
Really
small stuff we need to do. It's really annoying.
Yeah, and the reason we do doing that and it's kind of okay is because now you have the compute.
Yep.
Right? You're getting at least for that to be running in the cloud. I don't think it's going to be less than Functions Premium. I don't think it's going to be enable all of that on pure consumption model, because it has a whole lot of other state behind the scenes that has to manage. So I think it's going to be something like the app service plan or premium. I hope that I'm wrong and that I actually be able to run that on pure consumption, because that is going to be awesome, especially for the low latency or low volume cases. We're going to be still continue paying peanuts for that.
Yeah.
But having said that, there is nothing stopping you apart from resiliency and not having noisy neighbors, but like if you have a whole lot of small discrete logic apps that are part of a single application, you only need one app service plan, right? One host for all of those things they share, because if they restart, they started together because they are part of the application. The problem is if you have like applications that are independent sharing the same app service plan, that would have a problem. But like functional parts of the same application created as logic apps sharing a single app service plan, because of the volume says that it's okay to do that, is not going to be an issue. And you decide how you're going to be slicing and dicing that. Any other questions?
Yeah, the other question that I had, because it's becoming like an obsession of myself about testing. How do I mock the connectors with this model?
There is no a magic bullet on that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh my gosh, why?
It's still connectors.
Yeah.
Right. It's still connectors. So you still have the same ability on that one. I didn't use any of the managed connectors. But as soon as you use the managed connector, you need the Azure resource because resource group, because that's where all the API connections are going to live, and it's still the same model as the other one. Managed connections are managed connections. Yeah, it's called Alessandro mocking.
Yeah, I think they should do something better. But anyway, it's okay.
I'm sure that you're going to have the answer by next meeting, right? Because that's going to be a topic next week.
Hopefully.
Even it's going to be like 45 minutes of it was already decided behind the scenes, Tom. He already volunteered. It was not volunteering. Although I famous for doing that as well.
Yeah, but the thing, like with the I guess the solution that I found, I can check what happened, but what I really wanted was to be able to mock. So if I have a Dynamics connector, I don't want to go to Dynamics whatsoever. I just want to pass whatever kind of data I'm trying to test. And the only thing that the team provided to us is the static preview. But as the name says, is static. You cannot change that. So it's not useful.
Yeah. What is what Bill has been used a lot is a mocking framework, but then he's pushing everything to APIs. And in some cases, is a balance. You wanted to use the out-of-the-box connector because it gives you a lot of functionality, but at the same time, you need a system to test it.
Oh no, with APIs, it's completely possible. So you can use like, I don't know, Postman or API Manager or whatever. But with the connectors, that's not possible. That's a complication for testing your solutions.
Yeah. Is nothing different from what we had on good old Beanstalk, right? With the differences that on Beanstalk, you have the ability to say, okay, that one was because it was one way. We're just going to be dropping that on a folder, or we're going to be picking on a folder. So you manage to localize it a little bit more, but it's still the same kind of problem that you have there. It's a problem that is not being solved yet. Mr. Kenter, you have years of experience on that.
Alessandro, I mean, you're going to the heart of the problem, right? It's easy enough to build, it's hard enough to test, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Attack it, right? Run at it, right? So perhaps we should talk. You think?
Yeah, no, I think there should be something we can do about that, because it needs to be better. I just came like from a bank, and the decision they made was, we are not going to use this because we are not able to test. It's pretty simple. And they went all the way with functions, because functions is code. You can do the way you want. So you are able to do the proper unit test, integration test, mocking, all of that. And large caps, it's not. So say, no, we are not going to use this tool because we are not able to properly test the solution before going live.
The counterpoint that I have with that is as soon as you write code, you have legacy in your hands, right? So and you spend time writing the plumbing. So would that writing that extra time writing the plumbing would be worth the time that you're going to be spending testing? It's always going to be the balance on between those two. And in some cases, no,
they don't want to pay for it, right? They want you to write the code, but the testing should be free. Right?
Right.
Right. It should just self-test.
Yeah. So it's always a balance on that one. It would be a really interesting roundtable discussion. And now that you have the ability to get people from all over the world, we should block one of those sessions to be like no presentation, just an open roundtable. Bring people from everywhere and get like some of those burning topics to discuss. Who knows? We might even be able to bring John or Bex, because she's like close enough just in Australia. Derek. So there is a lot of people that we should be able to have that as a conversation.
I'm feeling
well,
even a hackathon might be a good option.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
we can come with the
you know,
best solution in a quick period of time.
you know, when I was at Attachmate and I was early, you know, on my list of things to investigate was what I called self-testing code, right? Right. How do you make that, you know, how do you make code, testable code, even if you can have self-testing code, but, you know, code that starts out with the assumption of testability built in, right? And then, you know, and then, you know, it's only been a few years, but it's a struggle, right?
Yeah,
with that level of testing.
I know that we're digressing and it's almost at 6:30, right? But just to spend a little bit, another 5 minutes on this topic because it's fascinating. It feels to me that it's still the same discussion about the infrastructure as code versus a PaaS. So you depends on where you are on that scale. You are going to say, okay, I have a requirement to have full control over my pipeline, right? I needed to everything that is there needs to be testable and this, and that. Because of that, you're on this side of the spectrum where you're going to be writing full code. I have increased requirement for agility, and I can give the ability to test just as a black box in the integration test. I don't need to test each one of the parts of my workflow in that particular case. I'm on the PaaS side. And there are things in between. A lot of things that we be doing is doing the hybrid. We do a little bit of that, and then the things that you find that is more risky, we actually, even if you could do with logic apps, we push into a function because we wanted to have more control on that. So it's always going to be the trade between how much control do I have to want to have, how much pain I'm going to have on testing, and how much I'll have to write it myself.
But that's a good call out, right? It's more that scenario-based testing. I want to prove that my function, what I've written, or my logic app, what I've written works under these certain conditions and scenarios and tests. I'm going to trust that the connector works, right? These guys have done their due diligence.
And that's exactly the point where they created the static static endpoint. So the static response. The problem right now is that they didn't detach the static response from the logic apps definition yet. Yep. When they manage to do that, then you're going to have a different story, because I can say I deploy with that static, I have these results. I undeploy, I deploy with this thing, and I just swap the things and I test it again. So it's going to be much more functional test. And that is, I think, is the kind of stuff that we should be pushing, instead of like a full mock on something. They already have a solution there, but they needed to improve on that solution that they have from my side.
Yeah, but the way I was looking to the static preview, so if I have the ability to enable and disable through some kind of SDK, if I have the ability to change the outputs of each one of those connectors by, I don't know, the pipeline, that was going to be perfect. So imagine that I can say, okay, so I have this logic app, I deploy the logic apps, but for that connector, that's the response that I want now, and I want that enable. When I'm done, I just disable and I let the connector work, by itself.
Input-driven mocking, right?
Yep.
It's almost scripted, right? You're saying, I need a script engine on the back end of the mock that says I need to do these steps. When I encounter this data, and so a lot of this really depends on injection control, right? Because upstream you're injecting a known response, known value, and when it hits that point in the code, the mock will then go, oh, this is that. So the other idea is what I call self-testing messages. So in the self-test message framework, never done this. It's only been in my mind for many years. Is that embedded in the message? You actually have the actual response embedded in the message. So when you send a message to the endpoint, normally the endpoint only knows parts of the message, right? But when you send the response to a mock endpoint, embedded in the message is the response that you're expecting them to send back, right? So when they send it to the endpoint and you get the response back, then your assert says, did that properly process the message and give me the response back that I'm expecting, right?
It get all the way to the mock, and the mock was intelligent enough to give you the response that you're expecting.
Right. So that's exactly what.
So it's a self-validating test messages.
Yeah. So that's exactly what we do whenever we are working with dependency injection. So that's what we do. So we have like the whole set of interface that we have for our classes, and instead of work with the concrete implementation, we work with the interface and inject whatever we want in terms of responses.
Right. The whole challenge that we all have with that one is that connectors are not managed by the product group.
Yeah.
They only have a very loose, in a way, contract definition. You needed to do triggers, you needed to do actions. What to do with the triggers and the actions is your job. And because of that, is that we having the same discussion so many times on around connectors for not necessarily on mock, but like a whole lot of different things, right? It still doesn't have a format for like what should be parameterized. Like you get the classical dynamics of the thing that is the thorn on my side since 2005.
Yep.
It feels a little bit like we kind of want that late binding type capability that BizTalk used to have, right? Where you used to be able to specify the connections and then go, right, that's going to bind into this adapter. And then at that point in time, you can say, right, these are my tests loaded with this binding, grab the test cases, scenarios, go through each, loop through whatever I do. And then during production deploy, you just point it to the production binding instead of the test binding, right?
The problem is they have that, but it's like because
the
API connection is that. But it's totally different from BizTalk, because BizTalk you have a logical port and is a request response, or is it a one way, and that's it.
Yeah.
Right. So whatever you could connect to that was fine.
Yeah.
You connect to that the runtime, the type.
This, right?
On
is
this
because
one,
we've got the adapter configurations inside the workflow. You're tightly coupling those two back together again. It feels like we need to somehow separate those two, so you can then have the production, pre-prod, all the type of configuration for the adapter. But at the same time, you have that option for that injection to say, I'm going to inject this static message into this. Or this static payload.
Yeah, unfortunately, what we've done in this is we've lost 20 years, right? We're where we were 20 years ago, right? And you know, now we need to like claw our way out of that and back into a dynamic framework.
It depends on Tom, because if you think about Logic App can be a receive location, can be a send port, and can be an orchestrator.
Right.
If you create those logical breakdown, then all of a sudden everything that is discussed that is connected to the orchestrator is either by a loose binding subscription that is an event, or by a direct binding that is like calling another item, right? If you implement the things using those techniques, you have mockability.
You can get back to decoupled. Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you actually separate out the connector,
then you have to implement logic apps using those techniques. That is another great topic to discussion, like patterns around those things. Like if you lose 20 years on because of how BizTalk used to work, and now you give the ability to anyone to create those things anyway, because it was the same thing as someone getting
framework supports it.
An orchestration and putting all the C# code inside, right? It's not necessarily that we lost 20 years, but like everyone that's picking up this didn't went through the pains of BizTalk and starting to think about creating everything as an orchestration with everything up inside. So maybe you needed to rethink, we collectively need to rethink how we're going to be creating that. And that stateless components, for example, is going to give us the ability to do that, because if you're doing that, we have like a paying for triggers extra, you have the extra latency, you have a whole lot of shit around that. Now you have the ability to say this one and this one is stateless, so I have the throughput that I need. And it's
you get to asynchronous. You get to asynchronous, which is the way to get performance, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
So there is a whole lot. Man, we need a round table.
We do indeed.
We need
It's
a
already
big
6:33, and I was supposed to do cook dinner tonight. So when my wife comes in, I'm going to say that it's your fault, and I think we needed to finish for today.
And
I'm
Wagner's
glad that I
asking me-
helped.
The pizza's
Thank
on
you.
order, right, Wagner?
Quite so.
That was for lunch. That was my lunch.
Good man.
Cool. See you, everyone.
Awesome, guys. Fun as
Really
always.
good.
Thank you so much.
Really good to see you, Tom. Really
Yeah.
good to see you guys. And
Good to see you all.
next one is going to be hybrid, so you're more than welcome to join again.
Well, my last one was a year and a quarter ago in Microsoft
person.
headquarters, right? So I had to
Yes.
join.
The battle scheduled for a new one.
Awesome.
Just allowed 2 weeks to go through quarantine
Yeah.
and about 8 months to try.
I don't
and book
think
it.
he would be complaining. Neither him or Joanne if they were able to come.
Yeah.
Oh,
Absolutely.
how's the brew going? Did you manage to get something from the local hops, New Zealand hops?
I had an earlier comment that I erased. I have brewed almost every weekend since then. We ran out of New Zealand hops in September, right? And sorely rue it. But it was timely because it gave me something to fill the weeks with, and yeah, literally today I was sitting drinking from our local brew. So yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good man.
So yeah, I convinced my local brew supplier to have more New Zealand hops. So that's good.
Nice.
Rakura and what was the other one? But I just submitted a Kolsch this year to the American Brewing Association. So, well, Joanne we submitted 4 beers. But anyway, so we used it all up.
Nice.
And it was very appreciated.
Good man.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you, everyone, for staying for that long. I thought there was going to be like a quick session because it was a recap of some other things, but we always talk a lot, and it was really good conversation.
Indeed.
Awesome.
Okay.
As Sandro, you have great ideas. So you should follow up on this.
Yeah,
Yes,
I will. I'm going to send a few emails to John, Derek.
See you guys later. We have a chat with him tomorrow.
Yeah.
Perfect.
See ya.
Okay.
Bye
Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you.